thank you very much for staying here. And after listening to Mr. Villa, I think it's very important to have here a Global System Mobile Association presenting the report. I think that digitalization is, of course, one of the main issues that have to deal with climate change, since the point of view that the contribution to reducing emissions. So this is my pleasure now to give the floor to Steve Martineau.
Thank you. The last time the world had net zero carbon emissions, it was a dark, dirty and dangerous place. Not a place I'd want to see my kids grow up in or my grandchildren. We don't want net zero healthcare or net zero education or net zero social justice. But we do want to get back to a time where there was a balance between the emissions we generate and the emissions we absorb. And I'm no climate expert. I'm Steve Martineau from the GSMA, the Mobile Phone Operators Industry Association. We want to get the world more quickly to net zero carbon emissions, but we don't want to go backwards, we want to go forwards. We want to go forwards to net zero and, at the same time, improve people's lives around the world. Last year, mobile technologies and services generated $3.9 trillion of economic value. That's 4.6% of global GDP. So if the mobile industry were a country, we'd be the fourth largest economy in the world. And that's on a par with the size of Germany. And the use of mobile by both consumers and businesses continues to grow. So our economic impact and responsibilities grow too. My organization unites the mobile industry, bringing together every mobile operator worldwide. That's 750 individual companies. We also work with partners in all the other key industries, from internet companies to car makers. This climate emergency really matters to us. We know it's a real threat to the planet and it threatens our businesses. Extreme weather events, flooding, loss of electricity, they hit us hard. We are an infrastructure business. How do you reach friends, family and essential services without us? People are relying more and more on their mobile phones. So our customers, employees and investors want us to act. We're doing three things to take this on. One, adapt to the changing climate. Two, limit our carbon emissions. And three, help others to limit theirs. As well as adapting our own operations, we're helping scientists understand what's happening on land and even at sea. How fast is the ice cover in the Alps changing? Mobile operator Orange has provided remote monitoring capabilities to scientists to measure it in real time. I was amazed to learn the importance of mangrove forests, not only as a carbon sink, but also for coastal flooding adaptation. In Malaysia and the Philippines, our operators partnered with Ericsson to deploy sensors, and they helped to double the survival rate of regenerated mangroves. When the worst happens, we are there. For example, when Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico, mobile operators AT&T, Claro and Sprint worked together in a way never seen before to help reconnect the country and support people in need. Perhaps you're thinking this multi-trillion-dollar global industry, 4.6% of GDP, must be a big part of the problem, but maybe not as big as you think. Using my smartphone for a year, I'm generating no more than the emissions I would generate in one 300-kilometer trip in my diesel car, or maybe 8 beef burgers. So you make a choice. 8 beef burgers, 300-kilometer trip in my car, or do without this for a year. And that's taking into account all of the emissions generated in the production of this and in the running of our networks and the charging of the device through the year. So the amazing thing is that even with over 5 billion people connected to our networks, less than 1% of global carbon emissions come from the mobile sector. And like the technology sector generally, our industry is very fast moving, and the data running across our networks is growing at an incredible rate. Over the last 5 years, data traffic has grown by 17 times. Innovations in technology mean that the same power supports much more traffic, but we have to run very fast just to stand still. Delivering all of this connectivity with less than 1% of emissions, we like to think we're a small part of the problem, but a big part of the solution, and I'll come back to that. I recently read the research that showed how companies that disclosed their environmental impacts through CDP had better access to capital than those that did not. It showed they had high-quality management teams who were aware of material threats and opportunities. And that's just one reason why the industry-wide climate program we kicked off in the GSMA this year started with a focus on disclosure. And now, 2/3 of mobile connections globally are provided by mobile companies who disclose through CDP, and that number is growing year on year. Now, obviously, companies mustn't just disclose. They must also take action to reduce their emissions. Disclosures really just tell you where you are, not so much where you're going. So we are working with the ITU, the UN body for the ICT sector, to develop our own emissions reduction pathway to reach net zero carbon in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. And this will be aiming for the more ambitious target of keeping within 1.5 degrees C of global warming. Many of our members are already setting science-based targets. 30% of mobile connections globally are now provided by companies who have committed to or set a science-based target. And I'd like that number to increase to more than half next year. Still, target setting is one thing. How do you get there? Of course, it's important to continue to drive energy efficiency, which is not only bringing environmental benefits, but is critical to our members' bottom lines. For example, operators the world over are changing equipment cooling solutions from electrically powered air conditioning to natural air cooling, even in some of the hottest countries. But one of the biggest contributions will be to switch to 100% renewable electricity. And it's exciting to see that 8 mobile operators, including Telefonica you just heard from, have already committed to doing just that. And in the process, they're becoming big drivers of additional renewable capacity. For example, Telefonica, as part of its global commitment to run its own operations on 100% renewable energy, worked with partners in Mexico to build solar power plants to supply its network and customer service centers there. And operators in Jordan, including Orange, also invested heavily in solar power to generate most of their network's energy needs. I'd like to hear from some of our industry leaders, members of the GSMA board, with this 5-minute video. Thank you.
Climate change is becoming the #1 issue, the #1 concern in the world for all generations. Mobile industry and the telecom industry, really speaking, has a critical role to play in the action against climate change.
Leading mobile operators have committed to support an industry-wide approach to net zero emissions in line with the Paris Climate Agreement.
The journey to actually addressing climate change now needs to go beyond awareness into action. And the first step to action is transparency. Sustainability is no longer greenwashing what we already do. It has to be a fundamental change in how we operate
disclosing our climate impacts to the CDP since 2010. And we fundamentally believe that transparency and disclosure is a critical part of really making some inroads forward in terms of improving the overall initiatives for climate change. One of the top 5 purchasers of renewable energy. And we have purchased about 1.5 gigawatts of renewable energy. Just to put that in context, that is enough to provide energy for New York City for a full month every year.
We issued a green bond in February of this year with the focus on using many more renewable sources of energy.
The efforts that we are doing to reduce energy consumption in all our operation, we are permanently increasing our portfolio of products, services, and solutions to help other companies as well to commit with climate change mitigations.
It was important for the industry and for MTN to take a leadership position on climate change, to acknowledge the work that we need to do and to acknowledge and support the impact we can make in other industries.
Using big data and a lot of our technology, we've been able to work with the U.S. Department of Energy to develop a tool that helps us project and better understand the impact of climate change.
It was important for Verizon to disclose our climate ambitions because this is something that we believe in very strongly. We have an e-waste program. We met our 2020 target already in 2019. We've set ourselves an even more ambitious target for 2022 with an objective to collect 5 million pounds of e-waste by 2022.
Today we are recycling 25% of the devices that we sell, but the target is to increase this by 50% and then 100% by 2030.
We have to make sure that the sustainability is at the core of the strategies of our strategy and the mobile industry at large. So I believe once we have these ingredients and ecosystem, we will be able to progress further and pave the way forward for other industries.
Our digital services and solutions help our customers do more while minimizing their carbon footprint. I strongly believe a better future can be only built through better business.
As a leader, you always have a certain responsibility in the market. Towards society, you're always standing on the edge and driving and showing the direction. It is important for us to show the direction and the growing importance of this climate action and the environmental concerns which are growing within societies.
Our goals are quite clear. We want to cut our CO2 emission by 90% by 2030. We want to be 100% using renewable energy sources by 2021.
We in STC have committed to the net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We believe that mobile operators shall play a driving role in this initiative.
We've taken the commitment as a purpose for the company to change 1 billion lives and to halve our environmental impact by 2025.
Reducing the amount of energy that we're consuming ends up being cost efficient for us, which we can translate to the consumers. So this is definitely something that is good for the environment, good for the company, good for our customers. There's no reason why this should not be done as fast as possible.
I really believe that it's important not to oppose the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and business priorities, because doing good is very much good for business.
So I hope this shows you how our industry is serious about reaching its own emissions, reducing them. Otherwise, I don't think we will be credible when talking to others about how they can reduce theirs. And we really do want to talk to other sectors about that because our solutions are key for them to decarbonize. The new research we've just commissioned and the report we are releasing here today shows that we're currently enabling carbon savings in other sectors of 10 times our own emissions. How does our industry do this? Not just by reducing travel through video conferencing and improved communications, important as they are. In summary, there are really two key ways. First, by providing smart connecting technology that forms the so-called Internet of Things. This means smart buildings, smart energy, smart manufacturing, smart agriculture, smart cities, pretty much anything with the word smart in front of it. An example would be smart buildings. This allows us to monitor building energy use remotely and adjust as needed. My smart meter and heating controls at home let me know how much energy I'm using, and I can switch it off while I'm away and have the house warm when I get back. Another example is currently small but has big potential is smart agriculture. Using connected sensors, growers are able to monitor and control air and soil temperature and light, water and nutrient levels. And as a result, for example, China Mobile used connected sensors with a strawberry grower, and the harvest started 20 days earlier. It had doubled by the end of the season, and at the same time, they'd used only 50% of the normal amount of water and fertilizer. These environmental benefits were matched by business benefits, so the system paid for itself within those first 12 months. That's the huge potential of smart agriculture. The second way our sector can help reduce emissions is by creating sustainable behavior change through the use of smartphones. Smartphones enable a lot of sustainable lifestyle choices. Now we can access the sharing economy, whether that's ride sharing, bike sharing, car sharing, house sharing, to name a few. And I can find out if my local lunch shop is giving away discounted meals in the afternoon to avoid food waste. We can bank remotely, shop remotely, and even see a doctor remotely now. Our research estimates that mobile communications technology avoided using 1.4 billion megawatt hours of electricity and gas consumption in 2018. And that's equivalent to powering over half the homes in the United States of America for that year. And this connectivity avoided using over 520 billion litres of fuel globally, equivalent to the fuel for more than 600 million cars for a year. In total, this is approximately 10 times our industry's own emissions. And by 2025, we estimate the amount saved could be double what it is today. As a sector committed to net zero carbon emissions and limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees C, we want to help others get there too. We believe a decarbonized world is a digital world. The net zero world we want to live in is not the next dark ages, and it doesn't have to be. We cannot keep living the way we do, and we must all make changes, but we must make changes for the better. It doesn't require magic. Much of the technology needed for our industry and many others to reduce emissions and deliver growth is available today. We are committed to delivering it. Thank you. I think we have time for any questions. If you have any, I'll be happy to take those from the floor. Does anyone there's a question here, maybe?
Thank you, Steve, and congratulations for the presentation and the report. I think it's very relevant. I just wanted, I'm aware of it, but it could be interesting for the audience to know what are the GSMA and all the operators of the organization working with the supply chain, and how we can also influence our providers to reduce their emissions.
Sure. Thanks for the question, Maya. So, regarding the supply chain, as all of you know, if you're setting science-based targets, you need to be able to demonstrate that you're addressing not only your direct emissions, but also the emissions of your supply chain and your wider value chain. For our members, the majority of emissions that are outside their direct emissions, they are upstream within the supply chain. And so the main challenge we have there is to work with suppliers to try and reduce their emissions. And we are developing a program of working with the major suppliers and we've identified who the major suppliers of our operator members are, and we'll be working with them to look for them to commit to science-based targets or to agree with us assumptions and plans we can make for them to reduce their emissions in line with the net zero future we all want to create together. Thanks for the question, Maya. Any other questions? There's one here. Yeah, Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was really interesting, and congratulations. My question has to do with the future. Perhaps 15 years ago, we were not able to foresee where we are right now in terms of Internet of Things and all the connected elements. So do you think that looking at the future, the question of the digitalization as an element that could perhaps create more inequity in the world because of the connectivity? Sometimes we are putting too much hope on digitalization, and I see that many countries still have a problem of connectivity, so they cannot get benefit out of the digitalization. So how do you see the future?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, I think today we should remember that we're looking at about 50% of the world's population being able to access the internet. 50% is a big number, but it's still only half. So you make a good point that there's still the other half, and we take that seriously. As we have other initiatives within the GSMA working with our members to address that digital inclusion question. But it's worth remembering that when you look at that other half, 80% of that other half is actually already covered by a mobile network that has 3G or better connectivity. And so those barriers to adoption or barriers to access for the internet are more about relevant local content, affordability of handsets, and digital literacy. Those are the typical barriers to access for many people, particularly those that are already covered. So we're working on addressing those by improving digital skills, identifying ways of getting low-cost handsets, and helping deliver relevant local content. Thank you. Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
I would like to ask you a more practical question that may be useful to other industries. Industry organizations are usually known for their lobbying activities or the fact that they try to influence policy, etc. How difficult is it to get industry members that compete with each other to work together on a topic like this?
Well, I think it's interesting. If I can just take a step back, I would say one of the interesting points for me, this is the first time I've attended COP, and I've heard a few people say they actually feel that the private sector demonstrates perhaps more evidence of leadership on the climate issue than the public sector. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, but that is what I hear. And certainly my experience within the GSMA, looking at the way that our members work together, there is a real sense of competitive collaboration. And our members are all extremely competitive companies, and I see some of the competitors in this room actually. And I know that you want to be doing the very best and maybe just being a little bit ahead of the other people. So I find that it actually works very well for people to compete on collaborative topics. But it clearly gets counterproductive if that's actually stopping progress being made. But I think we're smart enough to see that when it happens and to deal with it. So I think actually there's something great about seeing that competitive collaboration among our members. Great question. Thanks, Kia. Any other questions? Okay, well look, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for being here, and follow this with interest. If you'd like a copy of the report, it's available on our website, gsma.com. Thank you.